Reformed thinking. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're jumping right in today, and we're starting with something that isn't there. A silence, you could say, right in Genesis chapter 1. We're looking at verses 6 through 8, the account of the second day of creation. Now, if you read through the creation week, there's this rhythm, right? God makes something, and then he evaluates it. And God saw that it was good. That word tough, it happens on day 1, day 3, 4, 5, 6. But day 2, it's the odd one out. No, it was good, nothing. And that silence, we think, isn't accidental. It's got to be deliberate. It's a structural clue telling us to dig a bit deeper into what's happening with the water and the sky on this day. So our mission, our goal for this deep dive is to figure out why. Why hold back the good? We'll be looking closely at the two main actions God performs. Separation, that's badal in Hebrew, which feels kind of priestly, and naming qārā, which sounds much more royal, like a king issuing a decree. We've gathered quite a bit of commentary, exegetical notes, theological reflections, all focused on these three verses.
We want to unpack the function, the royal aspect, the priestly side of day 2. How does this boundary setting build the stage for everything else? And why the missing commendation? What's that about?
Well, I think to get at that question of the missing tohu, we first have to grasp what day 2 is fundamentally doing. Creating the rāqîaḥ, the expanse, it's foundational work. It's setting up the basic structure. Think about day 1, dealing with time, light, and darkness. Day 2 shifts to space, specifically vertical structure. It's moving the cosmos away from that initial state, the tohu, the formlessness and emptiness, and moving it towards a stable working form. It's the first big act of drawing a line, a distinction in the universe where things were maybe all mixed up before.
Okay, so when you say preparatory, is it almost like building a house? You frame the walls, you put up the roof structure first, but you don't really say this room is good until the furniture's in, maybe.
That's actually a helpful way to think about it. It's not just a dry report about materials used. It's a theological statement about God's sovereign rule. What day 2 achieves isn't just stopping chaos. It's establishing a consecrated order, a realm that's set apart, given a name, given a task. And the text highlights this through those 4 key verbs. God said, God made, God separated, and God called. That whole sequence is about establishing the architecture of his governance, putting that first vertical structure in place.
Right. Let's zoom in on that separation part then. The verb badal, that seems to be the core action. What exactly does this act of separating, of distinguishing, accomplish in the story?
Badal, yeah. Specifically the hyphal form, habitable. It's huge. It's one of the most important verbs theologically in the whole creation week. It means to separate, sure, but also to distinguish. It marks that critical shift from everything being just, a jumble, undifferentiated, to an ordered reality. You can't have life, meaningful existence without these distinctions. So on day 2, the rāqîaḥ, the expanse, gets its job description. It's commissioned to be this ongoing agent of distinction, separating between waters and waters, specifically between the waters that were under the expanse and the waters that were above the expanse. It's a vertical ordering, a cosmological sorting out of these watery elements into different zones, different spheres that God will rule over.
Okay, spheres of divine rule. That's interesting because he isn't destroying the waters, right? In some other ancient stories, water is this chaotic force, maybe even a rival god that needs defeating.
Exactly. That's a key difference. Here, God isn't fighting the water, he's organizing it. He's putting it in its place, making it part of a predictable system. He governs through what we later call ordinary providence.
Now, when we hear separation today, we often think division, maybe even alienation or hostility. But you mentioned the sources frame this differently. They talk about hospitality. That sounds almost opposite.
It does, but it's a really helpful theological angle. Thinking of it as hospitality shifts the focus. It's not about conflict, it's about purpose. In God's design, making distinctions creates room. It clears space. God separates here to make room for life. He's setting up the stage, the ordered arena where life can actually happen and flourish, and, importantly, where worship can happen properly.
Like building a house again. You need walls to separate inside from outside, roof from floor.
Precisely. Those distinctions are what make the space usable, safe, livable. If it was all just one big, undefined mass, it would still be that formless, deep, hostile to life.
So the limits, the boundaries that badal creates, they're actually presented as a good thing. Not restrictions, but the framework needed for things to thrive.
Yes, that's crucial. The sources we looked at describe these boundaries as gifts flowing from the Creator's wise love. Limits give creatures their proper place, their purpose, their security, their peace. It's telling us that order isn't the enemy of freedom. It's the necessary condition for meaningful existence and, well, for joyful obedience, too. If everything was just blurred together, if the waters above constantly crashed down, Life couldn't function. Nothing could fulfill its God-given role.
And this idea of setting boundaries in creation connects directly to later ideas about holiness and worship, doesn't it? The sources make a strong link to the priesthood.
Absolutely. The separation on day 2 becomes the blueprint, the canonical prototype for priestly holiness. It's the same verb, badal, or habitable, that's used later in Leviticus. Remember Leviticus 10.10?
Refresh my memory.
It's where God commands Aaron and his sons, the priests, to distinguish between the holy and the common, and between the unclean and the clean. That ability to make distinctions, setting apart what's holy for God's use from what's common, or sorting clean from unclean, that's the heart of the priestly job description. And where did they learn that kind of grammar? It's built into the very fabric of the world from day 2.
Wow. So ordering space on day 2 is like transforming the cosmos into a habitable sanctuary. The structure itself teaches holiness.
That's a great way to put it. The tabernacle, the temple later on, they mimic this cosmic logic. Think about the layout layers of separation, moving from the common outer court to the holy place, then the most holy place. Increasing distinction. God first draws these wise boundaries in the cosmos itself, and then he calls his people to live by analogous boundaries in their worship, their diet, their whole lives. Creation Week is giving us the divine grammar of holiness right from the start, starting with the sky.
Okay, so badal gives a structured distinction, this priestly foundation. But then God names the structure, qārā. How does that shift things? You said it moves towards royal authority.
Exactly. If separation badal provides the internal structure, the drawing of lines, then naming qārā assigns the purpose and asserts control over that structured realm. It's an external act of authority. We move from the priestly act of distinguishing to the royal act of decree. Throughout Genesis 1, God's word is doing both things, isn't it? It creates the substance, separates the realms, and then it names them, giving them their identity and their job within his kingdom. Naming takes the newly formed expanse and fixes its role.
And the way it's phrased, and God called it, the sources point out, this is the language of kingship, the rhetoric of royal decree. What's God really asserting when he names the expanse heavens, shemayim?
It's a fundamental assertion of sovereignty, of ownership. To name something, especially in the ancient world, was to declare your authority over it. It signals possession and a covenantal claim. Only the king, the ultimate authority, had the undisputed right to name places or subjects. We see this echo throughout Scripture, don't we? Isaiah 40, God calls the stars by name, showing his complete mastery. Isaiah 43, he says to his people, I have called you by name, you are mine. Naming is claiming.
And it's effortless here, isn't it? Unlike those other myths.
Right. No battle needed. He just speaks and names. It's pure, uncontested authority. Naming comes after the separation to fix the realm's identity. It defines what this heavens is for in God's ordered world. Royally speaking, naming places every part of creation squarely under his decree. It shows his kingship is total. When he calls the expanse heavens, he's saying, this domain operates under my will. It underlines that truth from Psalm 115. Our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases.
I like how the sources talk about this naming as the installment of a realm in office. That's evocative. It's not just a label. It's like giving it a job title. How does that job title, heavens, prepare the world for us, for human life?
Installment in office, yeah, that captures it well. Because the main point of divine naming here isn't just identification, it's vocation. It's about function. God's call summons things into being and fits them for their specific role in his creation. Naming sets the purpose for that realm, and ultimately that purpose is geared towards serving the creatures to come, especially the image bearer. So naming it heavens, shemayim designates the specific domain that, later on day 4, is going to host the luminaries, the sun, moon, stars. The heavens are set up as this office space, if you will, ready to be filled with rulers.
Rulers, the sun and moon.
Well, rulers in the sense that they govern time. Their job, assigned on day 4, is to mark signs, seasons, days, and years, essentially, to serve the creaturely rhythm of time.
So hang on, let me make sure I get this. On day 2, God names it heavens, setting up the office and the job description, which is basically hold the lights that keep time. But the lights aren't there yet.
That's exactly the logic. Day 2 provides the architecture, the location, the heavens. Day 4 brings the occupants, the luminaries, to fulfill the function already assigned by the name. The job is defined first, and the purpose of that job: to calibrate human rhythms. Our cycles of work and rest, our patterns of worship, ultimately our Sabbath rhythm, are all tied to the timekeeping function established here and fulfilled on day 4.
And this whole pattern, God separating, naming, assigning function, sets a model for humanity too.
Yes, it establishes the pattern for our own derivative vice-regency. When Adam names the animals later in Genesis 2, he's not just making up words. He's exercising a delegated authority, reflecting God's own act of naming and ordering within his own sphere. It shows the whole cosmos is meant to be this ordered, governed reality, a legible world where everything has its place and purpose under the king, preparing the way for humanity to live and work and worship within that structure.
Okay, that brings us to the structure itself, the rāqîaḥ. We know day 2 is about structure, badal, and purpose.
Yeah.
But what is this expanse? The text isn't exactly a scientific blueprint, and people get hung up on this idea of a solid dome, right?
Sure.
Like hammered metal.
Yeah, that solid dome idea comes up a lot, often based on the Hebrew root rāqîaḥ, which can mean to beat out or stamp out, like metalwork. But we really need to let the text define its own terms by looking at its function. The narrative's goal isn't to give us the material composition, it's theological. The rāqîaḥ is defined by its assigned role in creating order. It's the spread-out domain, the spatial arena that functions as the ordered stage for God's ongoing care.
So focus on what it does, not what it's made of.
Exactly. We need to resist pressing the text for modern scientific details it never intended to provide. That's that scientistic concordism trap. It's using the language of appearance, phenomenology. The sky looks like a vast separation. It's a theologically rich observational account designed to tell us about God's kingship and his control over creation, not to teach ancient cosmology as science.
But that root meaning to beat out still seems suggestive of something hard. How do we get past that?
We weigh the etymological hint against how the text itself describes the rāqîaḥ's function. Letting the root meaning dictate a literal interpretation, like a solid metal roof, actually clashes with other details Moses provides. For instance, Genesis 1:30, it says, "Birds fly across the face of the expanse of the heavens." Well, how do birds fly through a solid metal dome?
Right, they'd have to fly in front of it or under it maybe, but across the face of suggests flying within that open space.
Exactly. It points to the rāqîaḥ being the open span of the sky, the atmosphere where birds travel. That's functional evidence from the text itself.
Okay, what other functions does the text give it?
The big one we already touched on. It hosts the luminaries, verses 14 to 17. The sun, moon, and stars are placed in the expanse. Its role is to be the stage for these timekeepers. Again, the focus is totally on placement and function lights regulating time for life on Earth, calibrating human rhythms of labor and Sabbath rest, not on its material substance or rigidity.
So, this ordered space, the rāqîaḥ, named heavens, is the first big structural boundary. How does setting up this reliable structure relate to God's ongoing work in the world, what our confession calls ordinary providence?
Day 2 lays the architectural groundwork for ordinary providence. Think about the waters again separated into waters above. Meteorological waters, clouds, vapor, and waters below, seas, lakes. This established ordered separation becomes the predictable means by which God governs weather patterns. He sends rain and drought, mists and storms, working through the reliable structures he set up right here.
So when we pray for rain, we're not asking God to impose order on chaos, but to work within the order he already established.
Precisely. The world is dependable because of the order established here. It links directly to our Reformed understanding. Remember the Westminster Confession. It says God upholds, directs, disposes, and governs all creatures and actions. Day 2 shows us the ordering phase of that providence visually. The heavens, set up like this, become the visible arena of God's consistent care, distributing blessings like rain according to his sovereign plan.
And there's a worship aspect too.
Absolutely. Functionally, the rāqîaḥ is also doxological. Psalm 19.1 says it directly. The rāqîaḥ, or firmament expanse, proclaims his handiwork. It's a constant, visible testimony to the Creator. You could even see it as a kind of liturgical venue, a cosmic sanctuary ceiling under which all creation exists, and is called to praise the King who separated, named, and now sustains it all.
Okay, we've covered the structure, badal, the purpose of the function, rāqîaḥ. We have to come back to where we started, that missing evaluation. Why didn't God call day 2 good? If it's so foundational for structure and providence, why the silence?
Right, the central puzzle. And the answer lies in the teleology, the goal-oriented nature of the creation account. That missing tav is a deliberate signpost. First, let's be clear what good tav means here. It's not just nice or aesthetically pleasing. In Genesis 1, tav signifies fitness for purpose. It means something is ready, suitable, and functional within God's ordered plan, especially as it serves the goal of creating a habitable world for life, culminating in humanity and their worship. And day two's work, crucial as it is inherently preparatory. The structure itself, the expanse separating the waters is necessary, yes, but it isn't yet manifestly useful on its own for the creatures yet to come.
So the framework is up, but it's not doing its main job yet.
Pretty much. The heavens are formed, but their primary creature-serving function, holding the lights to mark time, hasn't kicked in yet. The structure created on day two is like the hinge that makes the later days work, but the door isn't fully functional until everything is connected. So the evaluation, the POV, is held back until the created realm is demonstrably useful, until it's actively fulfilling its role in the larger economy of creation, serving life, and framing worship. It's waiting for its telos, its intended goal, to be realized.
That fits perfectly with that common observation about Genesis 1's structure, the first 3 days forming the realms, and the next 3 days filling them. Day 2 forms the sky and sea realms.
But they aren't fully filled or activated in their function until days 4, luminaries in the sky, and 5, creatures in the sea. The text seems structured to affirm the completed function, not just the initial structure. And notice how the missing good from day 2 seems to be compensated for later. We get a double good on day 3.
Ah, right. After the dry land appears, verse 10, it was good, and then again after the vegetation sprouts, verse 12, it was good.
Exactly. Why the double good there? Because the boundaries set on day 2 finally allow the dry land to emerge, and crucially, that land immediately produces vegetation, food. That signals habitability has crossed a major threshold. The earth is now actively providing sustenance. Its fitness for purpose is clear.
Okay, that covers the land. When does the sky, the rāqîaḥ, get its functional goodness confirmed, so to speak?
That happens on day 4. When the rāqîaḥ is filled with the sun, moon, and stars to mark sacred time, only then, when the structure is populated with these timekeepers, does its purpose for guiding human rhythms of labor and Sabbath rest become fully operational. Now the structure is actively serving its highest creaturely purpose.
So putting it all together.
The creation earns its good evaluation when the formed realms actually start serving the flourishing of life and the rhythm of human existence, particularly our work and worship patterns. The heavens are good when they keep time for worship. The land is good when it feeds image bearers. Goodness is tied to function and purpose achieved, not just existence.
This whole careful sequence, separate, name, wait for the good. It feels like it's doing more than just describing creation. The sources suggested it acts as a kind of theological guardrail, showing a sort of polemical serenity. What does that mean?
It means the text is calmly, quietly, but firmly pushing back against other ways of understanding the cosmos that were common back then. The very structure and tone resist competing worldviews.
Particularly those ancient Near Eastern myths we mentioned. What's Genesis 1 resisting there?
Primarily, it's a complete rejection of the combat myth idea. Think of the Babylonian story, Enuma Elish. Creation happens because the hero god Marduk kills the chaotic water monster Tiamat and uses her body parts to build the sky and earth. Kingship is won through violence.
But
Here, God just speaks. He separates the waters. He doesn't slay them. The waters aren't a rival deity. They're just part of the created order, subject to his word. The calm, majestic pace God said, and it was so, signals effortless, sovereign rule without contest. His authority isn't established by fighting. It just is.
So the focus is on ordering for purpose, not winning a battle.
Right, and that also works to demythologize nature. In many ancient cultures, the sun, moon, stars, the sea, these were gods to be worshipped or appeased. Genesis 1 drains them of divine status. The lights in the expanse aren't gods. They are timekeepers, luminaries, objects created by God to serve a function for humanity. This desacralizes the cosmos so that God alone is worthy of worship. Day 2 helps establish the created world as a functional stage, not a pantheon of rival deities.
Okay, bringing this home, this ancient text about separating waters and naming the sky,
Yeah.
what does it mean for us? How does Day 2's boundary setting speak to life today?
I think it fundamentally challenges our modern resistance to limits. Day 2 tells us we should learn to receive boundaries as blessings, as gifts. The very structure of creation teaches a moral lesson. Wise limits protect life, give dignity, create peace. God drawing lines wasn't hostile. It was hospitable. It made room for flourishing. When we push against all boundaries in our time, our work, our relationships, perhaps we're fighting against the grain of creation's wisdom.
And that timekeeping aspect.
Yeah. Because the heavens were set up to mark seasons, days, years, it grounds the goodness of rhythms. It teaches us that things like calendars, scheduled rests, and specifically Sabbath observance aren't arbitrary rules or constraints on freedom. They are the very shape of creaturely flourishing. The rāqîaḥ constantly reminds us that our time is marked and governed by God, pushing back against that 247 always-on, boundaryless pressure of modern life.
And doctrinally, it solidifies our understanding of God's ongoing care, his providence.
Yes, exactly as we discussed. The reliable order established on day 2 is the foundation. Because God separated the waters and set the heavens in place, we can trust his ongoing governance. We receive weather, seasons, the daily cycle of light and dark, not as random chance, but as ongoing expressions of his fatherly care, his providence. It confirms what the confession teaches. He upholds, directs, disposes, and governs. Day 2 shows the initial disposing and directing that makes the upholding possible.
And is there a line we can draw from day 2 all the way to Christ?
Absolutely. The trajectory is clear. The same God, the Word who spoke creation into being and set these first boundaries by separating and naming, he is the same person, Jesus Christ, who demonstrates that same sovereign power later in the Gospels. Think of Mark 4.
Calming the storm. Peace, be still.
Exactly. He rebukes the wind and the waves, showing his authority over the very elements his words separated back in Genesis 1. It's a glimpse of that original creative power now exercised in the context of redemption. And you can even see how day 2's grammar anticipates salvation's grammar. The separation, badal, finds an echo in justification, where we are separated from condemnation, declared righteous, and adoption separates us into God's family. It's a holy distinguishing. And looking even further ahead, the timekeeping role of the heavens, so central to day 2's purpose being fulfilled on day 4, points toward the end. In the new heavens and new earth, Revelation tells us there's no need for sun or moon, because the Lamb himself will be the light.
So the structure of day 2 serves this age.
It serves this present age perfectly, setting the rhythm for our work and worship now. But it anticipates a greater fulfillment when creation reaches its final, unending Sabbath rest in the immediate presence of the King.
So we dug into Genesis 1.68. We saw that the missing good wasn't a problem, but a pointer. It showed us day 2 was about essential preparation, setting the stage. It's about the king using this royal and priestly grammar separating badal to create structure and hospitality, and naming porano to assign purpose and vocation, all ordering his world for us, for his glory.
And maybe a final thought to chew on. That original act of separation, badal, made the world reliable, habitable by setting wise boundaries for the sake of hospitality. If we take that seriously, that God boundaries create room for peace and flourishing, well, it makes you wonder what chaos, what formlessness, maybe in our own lives or our churches or our work, might be crying out for a similar holy act of distinguishing today. What boundaries, perhaps around our time, our technology, our commitments, might we need to prayerfully establish, not as restrictions, but to actually create the space needed for true flourishing and peace? Maybe learning to say no is sometimes the most creative, badal-like act we can perform.
Yeah, that's a challenging thought to end on. Boundaries not as cages, but as God's architecture for thriving. Thanks for exploring day 2 with us.